So I just want to show you there's no more carbon copy cloner. There's no more backing up. There's no more any of that stuff. It's there, it's redundant, and it's safe. This is a lot of work, but it's kind of paying it forward. You put the time in now and you get the reward down the line. Hey everyone, my name is Forrest with Rocky Mountain School of Photography, and today we're gonna talk about how to automatically back up your photos and videos using a Synology NAS. This video is sponsored by Synology, and when they reached out to ask if I'd be interested in doing a sponsored video with them, I leapt at the opportunity. I've been using Synology NASs for years. They've been reliable, great systems, and honestly, I've never had any issues with them. So we're gonna go ahead and dive in, but I want you to know that I fully believe in this product. It was a sponsorship that I leapt at the opportunity for because I truly believe Synology makes a great system. The first thing we need to address is what makes a good backup system. And the thing I like to remind people of is the 3-2-1 rule. The 3-2-1 rule states that everything we care about digitally should be in 3 separate locations. 2 of those locations should be local or on-site. 1 of those locations should be off-site. That could be cloud or separate location. Now, the 3-2-1 part of it, the 2 and the 1 are the important parts. And the 2, for most folks, could be achieved by simply a 2-bay NAS, something like this. This is the Synology DS723 Plus. And this little NAS has 2 bays, and right now I have a 16 terabyte drive in each bay. So if we configure this in what's called RAID 1, it's gonna take any file we put on it, and it's gonna put 1 copy on one of these drives and another copy on the other drive. So if one of these was to fail, we would not lose any data. A simple NAS like this gives us 16 terabytes of redundant data, which is pretty amazing. So those of you who are a photographer who've been, using SSDs and tons of different devices, a simple NAS like this could basically take all those hard drives and you get all that stuff into one box. And moreover, everything you put on it is immediately backed up on 2 disks. If you want to learn more about that process, I'm going to leave links down in the description to all of my related NAS setup videos. I've done a whole series on how to set these up, what different configuration options there are, all of that stuff. So we're not going to be rehashing that in this video. Mostly what I'm going to be focusing on this video is in the 3-2-1 rule. Okay, great, we have our 2 local copies. We need to talk about where that remote copy comes in, the 1 in the 3-2-1 rule. So honestly, there's 2 choices here. Your remote copy could be some sort of cloud backup. Synology actually has a C2 cloud, which is awesome. Amazon Web Services has a cloud. Google Drive, OneDrive, iCloud, Dropbox. There's so many cloud service systems that we could back up our NAS to. And the cool thing about this is NASs are like their own little computer. So we can actually tell the NAS to automatically do this process. We can say, hey, every night at midnight, I want you to take all the data that's on your drives and I want you to push them up to the Synology C2 cloud for backup. And it'll do it without you clicking a button. So y'all, I just want to paint a picture for you because we're going to get into the weeds pretty quick here. But what this means for you photographers out there, this box would give us 16 terabytes of redundant storage, and it automatically will push its data to the cloud if properly configured, which is the topic of this video. So that means you put a file on here and it's backed up and it's pushed to the cloud automatically. You don't have to click a button. You don't have to worry about anything. So if that sounds nice, keep watching because we're going to break down exactly how this works. So cloud services are one option. The other option is actually to buy a second NAS and have the first one back up to the second one. Now, those of you who want to do the second NAS route, that's going to be a focus of this video a little bit later on, but I want to make something very clear. You need to make sure that your second NAS lives in a different location than your first one. So this could be a detached garage. This could be a shed next to your house. I don't recommend a gross shed, but a shed next to your house. It could be work. It could be your parents' house. It could be a friend's house. It could be whatever you want. I know a lot of photographers, they're friends with other photographers and they store a NAS at the other photographer's house. So both photographers are backing up to the other photographer's house. Great way to do things. However you want to do it, your second NAS, if that's the route you want to go, needs to live remotely in another location. Now, cloud storage versus second NAS, they're both going to do the same thing. The difference is the NAS is going to be a bigger upfront charge. You're probably going to be spending, $1,000 on a second NAS with storage. Whereas cloud services, you're gonna be paying monthly for. But I know for here at RMSP, we use a NAS for our video storage, and I priced it out, it was $400 per month if we were gonna back that up on a cloud system, which is just prohibitively expensive. I mean, in 3 months, we could buy a NAS to have a remote backup that way. So you're gonna wanna kind of think about that, but those are our two choices, and both of those can be automated to the same level. A couple other considerations are your internet speed. Regardless of whether you're going with a remote NAS or a remote cloud backup, the speed of the internet at your house, and in the case of a remote NAS, the speed of the internet where the remote NAS lives, is gonna come into effect. So if you live somewhere where you don't have the fastest internet, you may want to try to see if you can get your second NAS to live in somewhere on your property, but not at a different location. So we don't have to rely on the internet, we can rely on your local network speed. I just installed one of these for a local photographer here in Missoula. We did 2 8-bay Synology NASs. One lives in his art studio, the other one lives in his house, and it's a detached studio with really fast networking running between the two buildings. And that brings me to my next point. If you are gonna have both NASs on site at your house, but different buildings, make sure you have good, fast, reliable network between the two buildings. So in this instance, he had actually run Cat6 cable through a conduit under the ground, and that terminated on both sides, and we were able to connect the remote NAS on one side and the local NAS on the other side to give him very, very fast transfer speeds. Again, if you want to learn more about this stuff, I've got those linked down in the description. We talk about network speeds, connectivity, all of that stuff with NASs. That's not really the topic of this video. I'm just trying to get through our project planning thoughts. So here's what I would do. I would start, if this interests you, by getting yourself a main NAS, the NAS that you're gonna use every day. And when I get the main NAS, I would be thinking about a few things. Number one, you always wanna get more storage than you think you're gonna need. Give yourself some room for expansion. You can get an 8-bay NAS these days and fill it with 14 terabyte hard drives, and you'll have over 100 terabytes of useful space. So they go big, right? And they're not that much more expensive for a big NAS. Start with that, and start by taking all your hard drives and consolidating them down onto one NAS device. That would always be step one. That's gonna tell us how much total data we're working with. And then I would start to price out the cost of a second NAS versus the monthly cost of cloud storage. And you're gonna wanna figure out which one's more cost effective for you. I do wanna note your second NAS does not always need to be as fast as the first one. Also, it might not need to be as redundant as the first one. For example, a lot of folks like to configure their main NAS in RAID 6. You maybe are gonna configure your backup NAS in RAID 5. So there's lots of ways to do that. Again, links in the description for those videos explaining what RAID is and what I'm talking about when I say that. A great main NAS for a lot of photographers and videographers that I recommend to folks is the DS1621 Plus. This 6-bay NAS has a lot of expansion. You can add 10 gigabit to it for faster networking, and 6 bays is more than most folks need, especially because you could just fill 4 bays to start with and then add the 5th hard drive and 6th hard drive later on as time goes on. Additionally, what I would do is just look at Synology's website. Pick enough bays that you have enough for what you need. I've set up 12-bay NASs for people, photographers who have lots of photos and they know they're gonna be shooting a lot, but the 1621 Plus and the 1821 Plus seem to be my most recommended NASs for most people. But I also do wanna say, even a 2-bay NAS, with the way that hard drives have gotten so much larger, like you can buy a 16 or 20 terabyte hard drive and put one in each bay, even a 2-bay NAS like the 723 Plus is awesome. And a NAS like this still supports 10 gigabit networking, which is great for that fast point-to-point speed. This would also make a good backup NAS to maybe a 4-bay or a 5-bay NAS, assuming you have enough storage on both devices. So now that we have a holistic picture of the project management side of things, it's time to get into the nitty-gritty configuration. How do we actually make this work step by step? So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna get this DS723 Plus set up and ready as my main NAS, and I'm gonna show you guys how to configure a backup on this main NAS to a remote NAS and a cloud source, so you can see both of those. I'm not gonna go through the setup process on this NAS because I've done that in other videos. Again, links down in the description. So what I just did was set up our main NAS with RAID 5, which means that I can basically handle one disk failure. RAID 5 is also called by Synology SHR, which stands for Synology Hybrid RAID, which is basically RAID 5. It's one disk failure tolerance. So now that we're set up via RAID 5 or SHR, the NAS is ready for use. I went in and I made a new shared folder called My Photos and Video, and I can add photos and video files to this NAS, and they will immediately be backed up, meaning they will handle one disk failure. They'll be on two separate drives. Now, the magic of RAID is that you don't actually have to have double the number of drives as you do storage. There's all kinds of fancy things that RAID does. But essentially, if you're configured in RAID 5 or SHR, one disk can fail and you will lose no data. Now I want to turn our gaze to getting a cloud or remote NAS backup of our main NAS. So in order to do this, what we're going to use is a program that is installable on the NAS called Hyper Backup. Now, Hyper Backup is compatible with tons of different cloud services as well as remote NAS backup, and it's really awesome. So what I'm doing right now is I'm actually accessing my NAS through my web browser. And if that sounds foreign to you, again, there's links in the description that kind of walk through all the basic information you need to get to this point. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to the upper left and I'm going to go to the Package Center. And inside of Package Center, I'm going to search for Hyper Backup. And there it is right there, Hyper Backup. We don't want Hyper Backup Vault, we want Hyper Backup. And I'm gonna go ahead and install this. Now, everything I go through, we're doing on the main NAS. If you have a backup NAS, great, we'll talk about that in a little bit, but this is all main NAS work. And once Hyper Backup is installed, I can close Package Center, go back up to my main menu here, and I usually like to right-click on Hyper Backup and add to my desktop so that now it's on the desktop right here, and not the desktop of my computer, the desktop of my NAS. And I'm gonna go ahead and open this up. So as soon as you open Hyper Backup, it's automatically gonna assume that you would like to back up what's on your NAS. And it asks us what type of backup we would want. So we have folders and packages, entire system, or LUNs, which is a really advanced option. I'm gonna go folders and packages, because really all I care about backing up on this device is my data, my photos and video files. So I'm gonna say folders and packages, click next, and then it says, hey, where would you like to send this data? Where do you want to back it up to? What's the destination? And you'll see that obviously Synology C2 storage is going to be their recommendation because they have their cloud, which is awesome. I'm not going to talk specifically about pricing in this video because I don't want to date the video immediately upon release if pricing changes, but here's what I would do. I would price out these different options. Once you know how much data you have, look at what your choices are: Dropbox, Google Drive, Microsoft Azure, S3, which I believe is Amazon Web Services, all of these different sources, and check out their cost per terabyte per month and figure out what's the cheapest. So let's say that's Synology C2, that we do our price shopping and Synology C2 is the winner. Well, all we have to do is click on whatever source or destination, we want to use, click on next, and all it's gonna have you do is sign into your account. So my NAS at home, I back up to Microsoft OneDrive. Well, when I configured it, I did this exact same thing. It had me sign in to OneDrive. I signed in, and that linked my NAS with my OneDrive, and then the NAS does all the work. It talks directly with OneDrive to send all that data up to my OneDrive cloud. So very, very simple to configure. You just sign in with your account and the NAS will start backing up to that destination. So very, very cool there. And again, all of these options are here. There's even an option called rsync, which you can actually use with other tools. If there's other cloud services that you don't see here, rsync is a way to kind of give yourself more access to other devices. There's all kinds of different ways to do it. So that's how we set a cloud-based destination. Again, I do want to reiterate that if you are backing up to the cloud, the internet speed where your main NAS lives is going to bottleneck how fast that can run. So if you live in a place with slower internet, your cloud backup might take a very, 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 very long time. Now let's say instead of a cloud backup, you want to back up to a remote NAS. And you'll notice that's an option right here. I can say remote NAS device. Now, if a remote NAS is your desired pathway, there's two ways that this splits. There's a remote NAS that lives in your home network, and that's easier than a remote NAS that lives totally remote outside of your home network. So as an example, if you have a detached garage and you put your remote NAS in your detached garage, that remote NAS is still part of your home network. It's still there. It can still be part wired into your router at home. But if you put a NAS at a friend's house, then that's a true remote NAS. And either way works, but I do want to say that the configuration of a truly remote NAS, like not in your network, is a little bit more challenging. And we're not going to get into that too much in this video because it does get a little bit technical, but I just want to show you guys, if you are hoping to do a true remote NAS, you're going to have to start worrying about dynamic IP addresses and some different things like that. So we'll have a little addendum on that in a minute, but regardless, if we are going to do a remote NAS backup, we're going to need to access our remote NAS and get a couple of things ready. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a second browser window, and I'm gonna go access my remote NAS that I've already configured. So again, buy your remote NAS, whether it's gonna live in your house or a detached garage or another person's house, whatever it is, get it configured. And I've made the IP address of mine 10.0.1.7. And here it is. I'm gonna log into my backup NAS. And just for simplicity, you all can see up here in the tabs in my web browser, I have main NAS YT, which is my main, that's this left tab. And I have backup NAS YT, which is my backup NAS. So you can kind of keep track of where I'm at in this video as we go. So on the backup NAS, I've done literally nothing. I've just configured it, set it up, got it on the network, and installed all the updates for the Synology software. So all I gotta do here is two things. Number one, I need to go into Control Panel and Shared Folder, and I need to make a new shared folder. So I'm gonna create a shared folder, and this shared folder is going to be the destination of my backup, where the backup of my stuff goes. So I'm gonna call this Backup of Main NAS. Very, very simple. I'm gonna leave all my defaults the same. Go ahead and skip that. Defaults, and next, and apply. And now I have a shared folder that I can use as my backup destination, okay? Where the data is going. The second thing I need to do on this backup NAS is go into Package Center. And again, we're gonna search for Hyper Backup. But this time we're gonna install Hyper Backup Vault instead of Hyper Backup. So Vault gets installed on the destination, the backup NAS. Hyper Backup gets installed on the main NAS. Go ahead and do this. So there we go, we have Hyper Backup Vault installed, and then same deal, I'm gonna go to my main menu, right click on Hyper Backup Vault and add it to my desktop so that it's chilling out down here. I'm gonna open it. So those two things have to get done on the backup NAS first, and this is regardless of whether you're doing a off-site, like different network backup NAS, or an on-site same network backup NAS. You gotta do those two things first. Now, if your backup NAS is going to live in a different network, somebody else's house, work, whatever it is, you're also gonna need to go into Control Panel, and you're gonna need to go into Remote Access or External Access right here, and you're gonna need to go into DDNS, Dynamic DNS. And you're gonna wanna add a dynamic DNS configuration. I'm gonna leave a link down below in the description to a helpful tool to run through this process, okay? This is basically a way for your main NAS to find your backup NAS out there on the internet. Because you think about it, your backup NAS is sitting at somebody else's house, and we need to basically forge a connection between the two. And dynamic DNS is gonna allow that to happen. It's a little bit beyond what I wanna walk through in this video because there are some little bits and nuances and tips and tricks. If this is something you guys would like me to do a detailed walkthrough on, let me know down in the comments. I would really like to know that, because if there is demand for that, I will make a more in-depth tutorial on specifically truly remote NAS backups. We can talk about that in the future. But DDNS, we would add a configuration, and that would help us bridge the gap between the two. If, however, you're just putting this backup NAS in a detached garage or a separate part of your house that's not attached to the main part, then we can go back to our main NAS and configure the backup. So back on our main NAS, we're gonna say Remote NAS Device. I'm gonna go ahead and click on Next. and it's gonna ask me, hey, what's the IP address of the backup NAS? Where do we wanna send the data to? I'm gonna click in there and I'm gonna type in 10.0.1.7, which is the IP address of the backup NAS. I'm gonna encrypt the transfer. Sure, if you're on your own network, you probably don't need to encrypt your transfer if you trust the people you give your Wi-Fi password out to, but might as well encrypt it. And then we're gonna click trust. Should pass, good deal. And then it's gonna say authentication, and we're gonna click the login button, okay? Now it might give you a little warning that it's not gonna find it. We're gonna go ahead and anyway and just say browser login. And we might have to say visit this website, that's okay. And here we get a login window for the backup NAS. Awesome. So it found the backup NAS on our network and it's saying, hey, log into it. So let me go ahead and do that. All right, there we go. And that logged us in. We can see authentication for a C. So it logged in and we have now given the main NAS access to the backup NAS, okay? At this point, we're gonna click the drop down here next to shared folder. And this is what's cool. It's actually gonna find that shared folder that we made on the backup NAS to put our data in. So there it is right there, backup of main NAS. We're gonna click on that. Leave the directory the same, that's all good. And we're gonna go ahead and click the next button. Now I do wanna make one other point. If you are doing a truly remote backup via dynamic DNS, you may need to do a port forward. This is another thing to Google for port 6281 or whatever this port is on your router at the remote NAS location. So it gets kind of technical. You got to get into your router settings. You need to do some port forwarding. Again, the true remote NAS, like a NAS living in a different location, there's some extra steps too. It's not terrible. And again, I'll leave links in the description to kind of walk through that process. But there are dynamic DNS, there's port forwarding, some extra things to set up. So this is all set. I'm going to go ahead and click next. It's saying, hey, what do you want to back up? I want to back up everything. So I'm just going to check volume 1 there. That's everything on my main NAS. I'm going to go ahead and go next. I'm not going to back up any of my applications. I just want to back up my data. And here is the cool part. So we can name our backup. I'm going to call this main NAS backup. This is naming the backup task. Sure, notifications sound good. I don't think we need a file change detail log. I don't want to compress my backup data. I just want the data on the backup NAS to be exactly the same as the data on the main NAS. I would like to schedule it. I'm going to have this backup run every day at midnight. And I'm going to have it check the integrity of the backup every Sunday at 8 a.m. Sure, that's just gonna run through the backup data, the main data, and make sure that everything is good. Everything looks nice. So that all looks good. Go ahead and click next here. Backup rotation, this is pretty simple. Basically, when the backup NAS starts to fill up, what do we want it to do? And we're gonna have it remove the earliest versions of the backup. And you guys, this is actually really cool. If you delete something off your main NAS, you can go to the backup NAS and retrieve it. And as long as you do it soon enough that it hasn't been deleted through the past, you can go back and restore that information, which is pretty cool. So let's go ahead and go next. It's gonna give us a little summary. We'll go ahead and click done. And then I think it's gonna ask us, yep, if we wanna back up right now. So I'm gonna go ahead and say yes, that'll run the backup right now. Anything that's on the main is being copied to the backup drive. And that is how we configure this. So you all, I know that's a lot, there's a lot of steps there, but I just want to kind of take a step back and say, once this is configured, you don't have to touch it. It runs itself. It's a very automatic process. We can see it just succeeded. It ran fast because I didn't have much data on here. But if I go to the backup NAS, you can see Hyper Backup Vault recognizes that things were backed up. So both sides of the equation are seeing that the backup is working properly. All right, everybody, now that we're all done configuring, I wanna show you how cool this is and how hands-off this is. So if you're just looking for the TLDR like Forrest, I know I wanna skip through an hour of this. I want you to show me what the cool part of all this is. Here's the cool part. So I'm gonna close all this stuff and I'm just gonna go access my main NAS. So I'm gonna go connect to server and 10.0.1.6, which is the IP address. I'm gonna go ahead and connect. And we can see here we are connected to the My Photos and Video folder on the NAS, the main NAS. Okay, So I have a couple folders of information here. I just want to show you all how cool this is. So here are my photos from the solar eclipse, all right? Let's put them on the NAS. So all I gotta do is drag them onto the NAS just like that, and they're gonna copy. And watch how fast that copies. You can see 2 gigabytes in under 5 seconds. Next one, we'll copy that over. Here's some B-roll I shot the other day, and we can see that again, we're getting incredibly fast. That was 4 gigabytes in 10 seconds. So we copy data onto the NAS. Now, immediately, automatically, once it's on there, it's redundant. We could handle, if a disk failed in the NAS room right now, we wouldn't lose any data. So that's just done immediately. And then tonight at midnight, the main NAS is automatically gonna start backing up to the backup NAS. So by tomorrow morning, this data is 2 places on the main NAS and 2 places on the backup NAS, which means we could lose a disk on both NASs. We could lose 3 hard drives essentially, and we would still retain all of our data. So I just wanna show you there's no more carbon copy cloner. There's no more backing up. There's no more any of that stuff. It's there, it's redundant, and it's safe. So I know this is a lot of setup, this is a lot of work, but it's kind of paying it forward. You put the time in now and you get the reward down the line. One other thing I want to quickly address is the difference between gigabit and 10 gigabit. Right now I have a 10 gigabit network connection, and we can see that if I run my speed test, I'm able to connect to the NAS and transfer files at about 800 megabytes per second. So that's better than most SSDs as far as transfer speed. That's amazing, and that's to a storage device which has many terabytes of storage. So very, very cool. If instead you have a gigabit connection, you're gonna be closer to about 120 megabytes per second. So just keep that in mind. Buying a NAS that has the 10 gigabit kind of add-on as an option can be a great choice. So to summarize, for day-to-day use, accessing a NAS is just like accessing any other external hard drive. Instead of plugging in the external hard drive, you simply go connect a server, type in the IP address, and you're able to use it just like anything else. I do want to point out, those of you who are Lightroom Classic users, that you can't store Lightroom catalogs on a NAS. It's one of the little weird things about Lightroom. However, if that's you, I recommend storing your Lightroom catalog on your internal hard drive, but storing all your photos on the NAS. That way your small little catalog can live on the internal, but all your big data photo stuff can live on a very large, redundant storage system. Same with Adobe Premiere Pro. Store files, you can store your Premiere projects on the NAS. It makes it really easy to open files from different computers and work on files differently. More than one person can access a NAS at the same time. So if you work with an assistant, you guys can both edit the same project or the same system of files at the same time. Gets a little funny if you're both editing the same project at the same time, so I probably wouldn't recommend that, but multiple users can access a NAS simultaneously. All right, everybody, that does it for this video. If you learned something, I would really appreciate you dropping a like down below. My goal for everybody watching this video is that backing stuff up can become a thing of the past that you don't have to worry about anymore, and you can move forward in your photography or videography workflow, just shooting, focusing on capturing the data and letting all of the data management happen automatically with a device like a Synology NAS. So if you guys like this video, I'd really appreciate you dropping a like down below. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section. And lastly, hit subscribe to stay up to date with future videos. We come out with videos every single week on photography, videography, and sometimes NASs. Thanks everybody, and I'll catch you in the next one.